All right, my friends, we have a very special video. We have the Bowers & Wilkins 805 D4 signature speakers. We covered this speaker at the Maximum AV event. You saw that video. Here's the formal review. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasalo with Audioholics. I'm really happy to have this speaker here. I know it's a limited edition, it's an upgrade, it's kind of the hot rod version of the 800 series. And in fact, this is the 8th iteration of the 800 series speakers, and this is their best yet. You guys saw that I gushed over the 801 D4 signatures at Maximum AV. That was one of the best demo experiences of my life. I really love that speaker. I love how it looks. I love the sound quality, the neutrality, the bass, just the airiness, everything we heard extracted from the recordings. I wanted to see if we could get something similar in a smaller package here, and we have the 805 D4 signatures. These are $13,500 a pair. They have a 6.5-inch continuum cone driver. They also use finite element analysis to make sure that all the resonances of the cone is way out of the bandwidth of the driver. This is a big upgrade for Bowers & Wilkins over the Kevlar versions of their speakers from prior generations. I just think it's a more neutral sounding material. The cone is very stiff on this. I love this tweeter. It's a 1-inch diamond tweeter, and it's in its own turbine that's isolated from the cabinet. It's extruded aluminum. It's actually beautiful. It kind of floats over the speaker. If you could move it a little bit, you could see it floats a little bit. And they've upgraded the mesh over it on it supposedly to improve the off-axis performance of the tweeter. All the crossover components have been upgraded on the signature version of this. They're in its own extruded heatsink kind of enclosure behind the speaker. So that keeps all the magnetic interference and all the vibrations away from the components, keeps it away from the driver interaction itself. I really love the connectors that they use, these 5-way binding posts. They're very thick, very high quality. It's a little odd to me that they have the 4 connectors like this in a horizontal arrangement instead of 2 vertical columns like most speakers do. But it is kind of cool because when you put the jumpers on it, it looks posh. So you could buy amp or buy wire these speakers, or you could do single amp. In my case, I did single amp, and that's what I would recommend for most cases. You really don't need to waste 2 amplifiers on this speaker, just one for the tweeter and one for the 6.5. In fact, the recommended power range for these speakers is anywhere from 50 to 120 watts is what they recommend. These are a relative easy load to drive. The sensitivity on them is 88 dB. They don't dip below about 5 ohms. I didn't find any problems driving these with this Denon piece, which is a masterpiece of 90 watt per channel integrated amp, but you could drive these with an AVR, especially if you bass manage them. They also come in the California burl finish, which is absolutely breathtaking to look at. I love the contouredness of this speaker. This is a big process that they take over in the UK to do this. This is part of the reason why these speakers are so expensive. So yes, for $13,500 a pair, they're not cheap. But if you want something that sits in a room as a conversation piece, the 800 series signature speakers really do that well. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my listening expressions of these speakers. So I brought these into 2 different rooms. I brought them into the music room in the Audioholics Smart House, listened to them there, and then I brought them into my theater room, which is what we're in now. This is a difficult room for a small speaker. Several reasons why. It's about a 5,500 cubic foot space. So you need a big speaker in here. As you guys can see, I have my reference towers in this room. I also have speaker boundary interference issues that I struggle with. When you put a speaker close to a wall, in this case, it's about 6 feet away, there's a suck out between the 30 to 50 hertz range, and it's very obvious when I'm in my listening position without adding subwoofers to the system. So you have to take that into consideration when I talk about my listening tests in this room. But what this room does that's so magical is it extracts detail. I have sidewall symmetry between the left and right. all of my acoustic treatments are very similar using the Sonosys acoustic panels from Anthony Gramani. And the imaging in this room is just magical. This is literally the best 2-channel experience I get out of any system in the house. I wanted to hear the 805 D4 signatures in here. I also had a pair of Arendal 1528 bookshelf 8 speakers in for review at the same time. These are obviously two very different design speakers with different audiences, but I thought it was an interesting comparison to kind of listen to these, then listen to the Arendals and go back and forth, and I'll try to give you a little bit of my subjective impressions there. So the first thing I want to start off with is I listened to a singer called Peter Cincoti. He's kind of like a Frank Sinatra style singer, and on the song Sway, I felt like the 805 D4 signatures delivered a very interesting take on his impressions of that song. The vocals seem slightly chesty compared to the Arendal Sound 1528 bookshelf 8 speakers, but it still sounded natural. I was surprised by the bass performance that I was getting out of these speakers. With a single 6.5, they were keeping up with the Arendals, which had 8-inch drivers for this song in particularly. I was getting good bass impact from the speakers. The piano decays were very natural. When he would tickle the ivories on his piano, you could hear all the decay in the recording. I heard a lot of spaciousness in this recording, and it just was a really nice presentation. There was a lot of airiness in the drums and the percussions. That's the one advantage of these speakers. I think it's because they also isolate the tweeter from the rest of the cabinet, so it just leaves a very open sound. Now, I did notice, it was a more forward presentation with the treble in this recording. I found that not towing the speakers in too much took care of that, and I still got really good, precise imaging. So next up was Gregory Porter's Holding On, and if you guys are not familiar with this artist, you should be. His recording quality is excellent. His vocals are incredible. This guy sings so passionately, and I looked him up, and the reason why he sings the way he does and he puts so much emotion into his music is that was his mother's dying wish for him to make it as an artist. And he puts it all out for his mom in tribute to her. I thought that was really touching. So in Holding On, you get to just hear how intimate this recording is. And the Bowers Wilkins do a great job. I like the way his vocals sounded. It didn't sound like overly bearing or over chesty. It was a bit forward, but the phantom center was really strong. It was locked in. And again, I got the spaciousness in the recording. It just sounded very rich and vibrant to me. And I felt like towing the speaker out a little bit or leaving them forward facing was the best presentation I got without it sounding overly sibilant. But overall, I enjoyed listening to this track. I listened to it a couple of times on these speakers. It was just mind-boggling to me that I was getting this much sound out of a speaker that's literally, about 13 inches tall by about 7 inches wide by about maybe 9 inches deep. Weighs about 33 pounds, 34 pounds. So it's a small footprint speaker, but it gives you a larger than life sound. Okay, so next up I have Radiohead, Packed Like Sardines in a Crushed Tin Box. That's a hard track name to remember, but man, this is demo material. If you guys are not Radiohead fans, listening to the song might make you a convert. The fidelity in the song, there's so much decorrelated information. There's a lot of electronic sounds. You get to hear it all. And when I listened to it on the Bowers Wilkins 805 D4 signatures, my room came alive. I just felt like I was listening to surround sound from 2 channels, very 3D holographic. The bass was missing. It was lacking the really deep bass. And when I compared it to the Arendal 1528 bookshelf 8, they have an 8-inch driver. They're a 3-way speaker. Obviously, those speakers were more full range than these. You really need a subwoofer with these. In fact, when I measured the in-room response of the 805s versus the Arendals, below 40 hertz is where the Arendals have a lot more bass. And in fact, right around 25 hertz, it was about a 17 dB more bass output from the Arendals than the Bowers Wilkins. So I do encourage you guys, if you want full range sound and it's in a larger room, I would pair this with one of their subwoofers, or preferably 2 subwoofers properly integrated so you can get full range sound. But there was so much detail coming from this recording. The steel drums, the little ping pong effects, the cricket sounds in the background. Everything that was coming through that recording, I heard in excellent clarity with these speakers. In fact, I thought I heard details sometimes in the recording I didn't hear with the Arendals. It was a kind of a back and forth experience between the two. They both sounded incredible, but they both gave different presentations of the music. But I'm not saying one is right or wrong. It's really a matter of taste. And I really did enjoy just what these speakers were doing for me in this room on that recording. So next up, I listened to Jhené Aiko, The Worst. This is a great recording. This is an artist I wasn't familiar with. I found by accident. Started listening to her music because it's R&B, but it's very spacious. There's a lot of just chill effect to this music, right? And if you want to be in the zone, you listen to her. Her music is loaded with tons of deep bass. These speakers cannot produce the deep bass in that recording, unfortunately. You definitely need a subwoofer. The spaciousness I was hearing was just very holographic, it projected out to you. Her voices sounded beautiful. I felt the S's were a little more sibilant on the Bowers and Wilkins than they were on the Arendal speakers in this case. Nothing that was like annoying, but it was just something that I noticed. But what was really cool about it was the fact that I felt like I was listening in surround sound with these speakers, and I would definitely recommend you guys check out that recording. So guys, there's a reason why Bowers and Wilkins are used in recording studios like Abbey Road, Skywalker Ranch, and the Boston Symphony Orchestra. These are reference grade speakers, and they look the part. They're a beautiful speaker. They're not a high value speaker, so if I'm going to give them any negatives, it's the fact that they are very expensive speakers. They're not for the budget-minded shopper. They're not a full-range speaker. They're not as neutral sonically as the 801s. The 801's D4 signatures are definitely my favorite speaker in the lineup. But that being said, I would love to have a pair of speakers like these on a nice pair of stands in a bedroom with a small 8-inch or 10-inch subwoofer. I think they could do a lot of magic. They will extract all the detail from your recordings, whether or not you listen to jazz, R&B, rock, you name it. They're a jack of all trades for that. They really do give you a nice holographic sound projection. I would make sure you're in a room that's not overly reverberant. Make sure you have good acoustic control in the room like I have in here, so you can get all the details of the speakers that these are capable of revealing, because they are a very detail-oriented speaker. They are beautiful to look at. People would come in and always ask me, what is this all about? You know, what brand is this? They want to know more about it. They generate conversation. All right, guys, I wanted to give you an alternate perspective on the Bowers & Wilkins 805 D4 signatures. I brought these back into the guest room. As you guys know, I complained when they were in my large theater room, I wasn't getting a lot of bass output from a small speaker like this. My room in my theater does not have a lot of room gain, and I also was dealing with speaker boundary interference issues based on the speaker relative to the front wall, so the bass coupling just wasn't good in there, and I thought the speaker sounded bright and thin, and it definitely needed subwoofers. When I brought these in here in the guest room, not only did I get more bass extension, but I just got a much more balanced sound. In fact, they were rolling off at 60 hertz in my theater room. They weren't rolling off in here till 40 hertz. In fact, F10 in this room was 30 hertz from these speakers, so they were giving me really deep articulate bass. And when I listened to Packed Like a Sardine in a Crushed Tin Box by Radiohead, I heard full range sound from this little tiny speaker. In fact, the imaging characteristics of these speakers absolutely destroyed what I was hearing with my Revel F328BEs. And those speakers are no slouch. Those are large tower speakers. But I was hearing so much more detail from the tweeters in these speakers, so much more energy from the sidewalls, just more spatiality, more spatial cues, more three-dimensional sound. There's definitely something to be said about sizing the speaker to the room. The 805 D4 signatures are really ideal for small to medium-sized rooms. If you have a large theater room like I have, you're going to need something like the 801 D4 signatures, which, as you guys know, is one of my favorite sounding demos of all time. So I wanted to give you that perspective, because these speakers in a small room, you don't really need a subwoofer. They sounded full range, they sounded articulate, very holographic in 3D. Very impressed when I brought these back into the guest room. So guys, I hope you like this video. If you like it, please hit the thumb up, hit subscribe. If you're on the market for these speakers, use our affiliate links below. We appreciate your support. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. And until next time, my friends, keep listening. All right, shaking it all out. All right, my friends, we have a very special video we're shooting today on the Bowers & Wilkins 805, motherfucker. I don't know how to say this lady's name. Is it Jhené Aiko? Jhené? Okay.
Aiko, I would say.
Aiko, okay. Strong, punchy bass.
Right. First take.
Jhené Aiko. Jhené Aiko. Don't jinx me. It's a little bit odd to me that they're oriented horizontally as opposed to having two vertical rows. Wait, two vertical columns. It's a little, what did I say? It's a little